I want to tell you a story about education in Nigeria. I was born in a remote village in the relatively poor state of Benue. As is common for those of us from humble backgrounds, my parents did their best to enroll my brother and I in one of the public primary schools close to home. This way, we could trek to school and back and not cry so much about hunger, since there wouldn't be anything like those break time meals. Anyways, you get the picture. Our mornings were usually an assembly in front of an uncompleted building that houses our various classes. The building had no windows, no doors, and the roof seemed like it was built before the Nigerian Civil War. Some of it had already given way to the rain and sun. There was this day I didn't want to go to school. It had rained heavily the previous night and I didn't want to suffer in class that morning. You see, whenever it rains, the pupils are made to sweep the water from the classrooms and the headmaster's office. This could take the whole day because first we would have to remove the desk and dry them outside under the sun, after which we then look for empty buckets to pack the stagnant water into. Sometimes the water is so large that it takes hours to drain. When this phase of the work is done, we then move on to mopping the floors and drying them so people don't fall down. Remember, we still have to return the desks to the classrooms. All that heavy lifting makes my muscle hot. Yeah, I had muscles. Sometimes the cleaning can take the whole day, and if we're unlucky, another rain will start falling while the cleanup is still on. Schooling here was hell, but I enjoyed it, every bit of it. More so because I was being taught in my native language. Yeah, I thought this was cool at the time. However, that was until a new kid came in from a private school and he wanted to be friends with me. The problem was, he spoke English and I had no idea what he was saying. It took me months after he enrolled in my primary school to learn how to construct my first sentence in English. Thank God my father was able to move us out of that place into a better school much later. Now, this happened over 20 years ago, but then I logged into Twitter sometime last week and I saw this.
This is a primary school and even a junior secondary school in one of the states in northeast Nigeria. Okay, it may interest you to know that this is the JS1 class. Am I right?
Yes.
This is JS1 class, and then this is what? Primary what? This is primary 4 and 5. Please come close. Let us see the building. Let us see the board. This is primary 4 and 5, and then we will go to the other classes. Please let us see the building. This is what they have as building, and then we have primary 3 and 4 here.
These are the leaders of tomorrow. This is where their minds are being sharpened. But you know what is worse? This deplorable situation extends to universities and other higher institutions of learning in Nigeria. This story is not about the state of education in northern Nigeria. No. It is not about the dilapidated school structures in Lagos State or any other state for that matter. Rather, in today's episode, I want to show you how rotten the Nigerian education system is and why I believe education in Nigeria is dying a slow and painful death. Imagine studying very hard in an environment like this to pass your senior secondary school certificate examinations. With sheer diligence and hard work, you were able to get 8 distinctions and 1 credit. And then you sat for the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Exam, popularly known as JAMB. You did your best, but could only score 250. You've always wanted to study medicine, but no school was willing to take you on. Your score is too low, they said. So you do what all your mates decided to do. Change your course to something else, something related, maybe biochemistry or microbiology, something in the biological sciences. Finally, you got the admission you wanted. But on resumption to the university of your dreams, You are now faced with worse learning conditions than you endured in your poor secondary school. Sounds familiar? Public universities in Nigeria are just as poor as public primary and secondary schools. Back in my university days, we had so few lecture halls that we took a lot of our courses in the convocation square. Yeah, it had a roof, but it was an open hall. Our public address systems were not working. The tiny ones some lecturers bring to class were often with dead batteries, and their voices kept going off like some robots in typical science fiction movies. My friend and I were somewhat allergic to struggling with the crowd to hear what the lecturer was saying, so more often than not, we relied on lecture notes to know what had happened in the lectures we attended. Some lecturers came into class already angry at the thought of taking lectures in open squares with no public address systems. These ones read notes and then tell you to jot down whatever you hear. But how about if you are unable to hear them from the back? Well, you take it up with the gods because, again, you are in a public university. According to a Vanguard report published in 2021, the Nigerian government allocated just 7% of its annual budget to education. So, we have schools that are heavily underfunded. Nigerian schools suffer from poor infrastructure, with some of the buildings already falling apart. Many of the institutions lack proper maintenance, leading to collapsing roofs and the buildings in physical conditions that endanger the lives of both students and staff. How can one learn in such an environment? Some primary and secondary schools have over 20 to 30 children in one classroom as a result of a rapidly growing overpopulation. The authorities fail to understand that an overpopulated classroom provides a teacher-student ratio that is bad for the personalized learning of these children. This then leads to a lack of individual attention for the students. But how about access to quality learning materials? While we were in school, my friend pointed my attention to the textbook and lecture materials one of our lecturers was using at the time. It was the same material used in the late 80s and early 90s. So we have schools that are stuck with outdated textbooks, limited laboratory equipment, and insufficient resources. Sometimes you as the student are left wondering, how did these schools even get the accreditation to run some of the programs they offer? But let's not dwell on the schools alone. How about the teachers and lecturers expected to train these students? Let me tell you another personal story. My mother was a primary school teacher for 35 years. There were months we had to pray and fast for the state government to pay salaries. Some of her colleagues stopped going to work because, according to them, they would rather go to farm and use the proceeds to take care of their families than die waiting on the Benue state government to pay salaries. My mom would go to school in the mornings and take 4 to 5 classes in a day because of the shortage of classroom teachers. There was no day she came back home and did not have to take painkillers to relieve her headaches and all sorts of body pains. She did this for 35 years. Now, in January 2023, a report by Punch newspapers revealed that the Benue state government owed teachers 13 months' salaries. Yeah, these people took teaching jobs because some of them genuinely loved to teach. But why on earth would you owe someone for 13 months? Do you plan on killing them or something? Some of them are retired now, but what do they get for all those years of service? An average professor in Nigeria earns the equivalent of $210 per month. Yet, the government still fails to pay them these meager salaries. It will surprise you to know that the Nigerian government is still withholding some lecturer salaries, according to a Premium Times report back in February 2024. How can you keep people on the same salaries since 2009 and then somehow still refuse to pay them? A recent report by the Daily Trust newspapers revealed how lecturers from Nigerian universities are living en masse, just like medical doctors. According to one of the professors interviewed in that piece, His salary for so many years has remained at 364,000 naira. But then, when the last 8-month strike happened, they were not paid a dime. Imagine a man with a family to feed, staying penniless for 8 months after spending a fortune in schools gathering multiple degrees. The Guardian newspapers reported in October 2023 that about 50% of lecturers already resigned from their various institutions. This serious lack of awareness or blatant disregard for what is happening in the education sector has consequences, and they are beginning to show. The education standard in Nigeria has fallen. Apparently, the inadequate funding for schools is beginning to affect the quality of education that these schools can dish out to students. From secondary schools to tertiary institutions, the stories are the same. Take for instance, when JAMB released UTME results back in April this year, the body noted that 76% of the candidates scored below 200. That is, out of the 1.9 million people that sat for that exam, over 1.4 million didn't even score up to 50% in the exams. The reasons for these massive failures are many, but the most glaring is the limited access to computers, the internet, and other educational technologies in our secondary schools. When the government fails to adequately fund schools, they manage whatever they have. This ends up giving us half-baked students and graduates struggling with basic comprehension and critical thinking ability. But there's a whole lot more at stake here. Let's come back to the clip I showed you at the beginning of this video. Now, do you think these children will continue in this school environment for long? Why should they? Why should they bother when they grow up to see that they can make money from the agbero industry that is booming in Lagos and the southeast? Why should they bother about learning in this kind of environment when in a few years they can get locally manufactured arms and pose as kidnappers or unknown gunmen, taking people for ransom and getting paid in millions of naira? Why should these great people trying to educate these children even bother when they can join local thugs and find their way into the circle of their state politicians? The Nigerian education sector is broken. But if we don't fix it, we will soon come to a time when professors will be extinct from Nigeria. We may wake up one morning and all we have is a lucrative industry of thuggery and kidnapping spurred by our poor level of education. But how do we go about fixing the mess we are in? Well, we need to start by appointing educated people who care about education into positions in government. In other words, don't hire an accountant to serve as your education minister. If you will not take your car to a plumber to fix, why will you hire people with no idea what they are doing to manage the education sector? Also, the poor state of infrastructure in Nigerian public schools needs urgent attention. Teachers need to be well trained and well compensated. And the modern syllabus with real-life application should be introduced to schools. I think useless courses should be scrapped and replaced with something else. Above all, for the sake of the future of this country, we need to introduce subjects like personal finance, critical thinking, and productivity into our schools. Education, I believe, is more than just going to school. But if we are being serious about fixing our education problem, we ought to start thinking about rebuilding our schools and making our children our topmost priority. Thank you for watching this episode. Check out this one showing up on your screen right now, and I'll see you inside.